Hello, my name is Robby, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a recovery tool that has been really helpful for me, and I hope that it will be for you as well. This recovery tool is known as the Serenity Prayer, and I'm going to be presenting it to you today and then sharing some of the lessons that I have learned from it. So I'll share with you what that is. It's going to be up on the screen here. So the Serenity Prayer, which is originally attributed to a man by the name of Reinhold Niebuhr. So I'll read it out here, and then we'll kind of go through it bit by bit. So the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. So this prayer, as I said, was originally attributed to a man by the name of Reinhold Niebuhr. His full name was Karl Paul Reinhold Niebuhr, and he lived from 1892 until 1971. Just a little bit of background information on him. He was an American Reformed theologian, an ethicist, a commentator on politics and public affairs, and a professor at Union Theological Seminary for more than 30 years. Niebuhr was one of America's leading public intellectuals for several decades of the 20th century and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1964. A public theologian, Niebuhr wrote and spoke frequently about the intersection of religion, politics, and public policy, with his most influential books including Moral Man and Immoral Society and the Nature and Destiny of Man. So one thing to note is that the original Serenity Prayer is actually based on the first paragraph of this prayer that you see. So that was a short version, and that first paragraph has been featured heavily within the works of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's used as a core part of their core programming. So some of you may be more familiar with the very first verse, but not with the rest of it. The longer version that you see here is a version that I was introduced to early in recovery, and I really like it. I find that there are a number of other concepts it includes which support the original first paragraph, but also kind of expand on it a little bit. So this is, I guess you could say, the full version of the Serenity Prayer as it's attributed. There is actually, however, some, just to clear this out of the way, there is some disagreement on who actually wrote this prayer. If you look up on Google, there's some disagreements on who originally may have first said these words and whether it's been wrongly attributed to Reinhold Niebuhr. I'm not exactly sure who it is. There's also some disagreement on whether this is actually just one prayer, which would be the first paragraph, or whether it's multiple prayers that have been put together. And the second three paragraphs were actually just added later by somebody else. There's, again, disagreement on that. Regardless, I have found this prayer to be really powerful in my own journey and my own recovery journey. And I found it to be an encouraging tool that provides perspective for me along my path. I find so often that the struggles that I have in life are based on my own lack of understanding, and this prayer can help bring clarity to me as I seek God's will instead of my own. So there's a number of different truths and core concepts that are communicated really well through this prayer, but I've chosen to focus on three for today. And these are going to be, firstly, living in serenity, what that kind of looks like. Secondly, understanding my sphere of influence. And thirdly, growth through challenge. So these are the three kind of topics that I'm going to be touching on today. So first of all, living in serenity. The part of the prayer that speaks to that is, God, grant me the serenity. So what is serenity? And I looked this up in the dictionary, and it states it is the state of being calm, peaceful, and untroubled. When I think of serenity, I think of contentment and acceptance. I think the Apostle Paul in the Bible gives a really good example to us of this in Philippians 4, verse 11 to 13, when he says, I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. In the same way, we in recovery, I think, are working towards a state of being in which we are at peace with ourselves and others as much as we can affect that. This is the reason that the 12 steps and other similar programs lead participants through a process of confession and breaking areas of bondage in our life that keep us in addiction and a chaotic lifestyle that comes with it. So how do we live in serenity? There's many factors that this prayer hints at, but in summary, we first of all have to understand that we have to understand our place in the grand scheme of life. This is really important. This aspect of humility is really important in order to achieve and maintain serenity. If, on the opposite side, if we believe that we are in charge and we live as if God serves us, then we cannot live a life of serenity. Humility and service to others are two of the best signs that we are actively living in serenity. If we have a correct impression of ourselves and if we focus on our relationship with Jesus and service towards others around us, we will naturally grow in our serenity. Feeling serenity in our lives is a sign that we are achieving the promises of recovery. The promises of recovery are a concept that it's kind of like evidence that we can point to as we grow in our recovery that we're moving along, we're growing. So as we grow in recovery and adopt a new lifestyle more and more, these promises of recovery start to come true in our lives. And what are some of these promises of recovery? There are many things, but a few are self-acceptance, maturity, integrity, trust, others putting trust in us again, and us putting trust in ourselves and others. Also freedom and the ability to contribute to functional relationships that we are a part of. So these are just a few core concepts of what living in serenity looks like, but really serenity is the goal that we're working towards as we go through recovery, and this prayer guides us towards that. So the second concept, understanding my sphere of influence. In the prayer, it talks about accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Again, a verse that I think of that I think leads to this and gives this credibility state is Luke 12:25-31, which says, "Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? Consider how the wild flowers grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink, and do not worry about it. For the pagan world runs after such things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well." So it's a huge temptation for us to spend far too much of our time focused on things that we cannot actually control and have no business actually getting involved with. When we spend our time judging and condemning others or worrying about the things of this life, we allow our own issues and shortcomings to grow and fester further, all the while letting ourselves off the hook. It's really an aspect of us pushing blame onto others and kind of outsourcing the pain and the discomfort that we feel and assuming that somehow that's attributed to the actions of others and not things that we could actually control. The entire 12-step process, the 12 steps of AA and other types of recovery, focus on addressing this lackadaisical attitude that so many of us have lived in for so many years. The 12 steps break down how we can go about changing the aspects of our life that we do have control over, and it teaches us to accept the realities in areas that we cannot. For many of us, when we come into recovery, we realize that we've now lost access perhaps to relationships or people around us, and we realize that we have no control over how they respond to us and how the realities of life, the choices that we've made have left us in a new, different, uncomfortable position in life. And so we're kind of stripped away of these things that we used to think we had control over, the people we used to think we had power over, for instance. And all of a sudden we realize that we actually have a lot less power than we initially thought. And so it's a good thing. It's a part of this recovery journey. And we have to realize what it is we actually should have control over and what we don't. Step 9 in the 12 steps in particular guides us to make amends and to, quote, sweep our side of the street. A core concept of this step is that we cannot control the outcome of these amends conversations that we have, but we allow God to make room in the other person's heart over time. In some cases, those that we make amends to will not be able to accept our amends in the moment, but later hopefully, with time and healing, they will come to a place in their life where they can accept that, and then they will hopefully return to us and provide an opportunity for restoration of that relationship. In other cases, this restoration of relationship unfortunately never occurs on this side of heaven, and so this too is something that we must be prepared to accept with God's grace. And obviously, none of us want to hear that. But there is truth in the fact that we cannot control how others will respond to us as we go through this recovery process, and yet we still have to do it. We still have to do what is our part in terms of attempting to make amends to those that are safe to do so with. So, God asks us to be courageous in the areas that we do have control over, but he also asks us to trust him as he works in others' hearts, which we have no control over. We must surrender the timeline to him of our recovery journey, but we have to make the most of the energy and the opportunities that we do have to work in the ways that he leads us towards. So it's kind of this reimagining or re-understanding of what it is that we have control over, letting go of the things that we don't, and kind of figuring that that's God's territory. He's going to deal with those things, but I have to deal with my stuff over here. So the third concept that I think comes through well in this prayer is what I call growth through challenge. The part of the prayer that I'm referring to says, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace. Again, a scripture passage that I think works well with this is 1 Peter 5, 8-10, which says, "Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of sufferings. And the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, after you have suffered a little while, will himself restore you and make you strong, firm, and steadfast." So I'm not going to sugarcoat the fact that going through recovery can be incredibly challenging and leaves us in a generally uncomfortable place in life. And that's probably a very mild way of putting it, honestly. It can be incredibly painful, and there's aspects of suffering that come along with this recovery journey. For instance, if you or I have been discovered in our addiction by others and it's a surprise to them, there's a fallout that comes with that. And it can seem like at times we are fighting a losing battle. Even if we want to change, the power and the strength of the addiction that we've created is legitimately strong. And so it's going to take time to actually remove those chains. At other times, even when we are further along in our recovery journey, we may feel stuck being judged by others as we in the way that we used to be, when actually now we are actively pursuing new lifestyles. So regardless of our stage in this recovery journey, we will, unfortunately, experience hardships. Some of these hardships are deserved, while others are undeserved. However, in spite of this fact, we must continue to keep our faith in God to give us strength through our journey. And we can't control those things. Those are things that we can't control in terms of others' views of us. But all we can control is our conduct here today, and we can make the most of that. So hardships of any kind are never experiences that we want to go through. And yet so often the key to our own growth and development lies on the other side of them. The recovery journey is one of these times of hardship, but it can lead to a beautiful future if we stay the course and if we do the work. When I think of a practical example of this concept, I recently became a father for the first time, and these first 6 months of my daughter's life have brought a great deal of hardship, but also joy to my life. Having a child has drastically decreased the amount of time that I have to myself, and drastically increased my general overall level of stress in my life. This process has shown me many aspects of myself and my relationship with my wife that were not working well before, and now they're painfully obvious. In the midst of a time of hardship like this, I am essentially faced with two choices that I can make. One option is to work hard, embrace this change, rely on God to give me strength each day, to love my daughter and my wife in very practical ways, even when I am pushed out of my comfort zone. So that's, option one. The second option, ultimately, is to choose to listen to what I call the sick old voice in my head from my past that tells me to avoid responsibility, shirk my duties as a father and as a husband. And these two paths ultimately will lead to drastically different outcomes. One favors short-term comfort, and the other favors long-term blessings. So, in a practical aspect, that's one example of this, challenge, this hardship temporarily that can lead to blessings in the future. But we, all the way through that process, we have choices to make every second of every day. We can choose to either follow or disregard the things that God is putting before us. So there's no fast track in recovery and in life. We cannot earn a future blessing without putting in the work now. Following along with the kind of parenting analogy, the only way that I can experience what it is like to be the biological father of a 20-year-old, daughter, for instance, is to also be the father of that 1-day-old baby. There's no quick way of just skipping to that 20-year-old, lifestyle. You have to kind of progress from day one all the way to 20 years and beyond. Similarly, there's no way to enjoy the blessings of being 20 years clean and sober without at one point also being 1 day clean, and then putting in the enormous amount of work that comes between those two dates of time. So this journey will require hard work, dedication, and some level of suffering before we become the new person that we need to be in the future. So it's really important to note at this point, though, that we are not alone in these times of challenges. The challenges that we face in recovery today are not unique to me or to you or to anybody else in this recovery journey. And groups like ReGroup and other recovery communities are essential resources for all of us pilgrims on this journey of recovery. So an encouragement to myself and to all of us is to use those who are around you to strengthen us in our journey, and in turn to be a support to others. And truly, we get so much out of being a support to others as well as receiving that support from others. So we need to be both receiving and giving at all times to others around us in this recovery process. So those are the key three kind of concepts that I felt stood out to me as I was seeking discernment about this concept and this tool. One other thing that is not directly related to it, but I wanted to share, I'll just call the power of the spoken word. So I wanted to add one final lesson that I have learned that is not specific to the Serenity Prayer, but is true for any type of statements about truth and wisdom. And this could include, passages of Scripture and any other kind of truth statements. And this concept is that our spoken words have a great deal of power. They have power both in our own lives here on earth, and they also have an effect actually on the heavenly realms and what's happening in a spiritual dimension and way. We can use our words and our voice to tear ourselves and others down, but also to build up. And the same is true of our relationship with God. We can strengthen or damage that relationship based on the vocal words that we choose to use and utter from our mouths. So I've found for myself that reading and speaking out loud has been a hugely powerful way of resetting my attitudes, my beliefs, and my perspectives in a way that just thinking can't. It's somehow different. I can think the same concept, but if I say it out loud, it gives it a power. One example I can think of with this is I remember sitting on my bed in the dark as a single man in my earlier days of recovery, wondering to myself, and in a state of great angst, I guess you could call it, wondering if I could ever find freedom. And one thing that I was led to say out loud was the words, "God, you love me." Those four words, "God, you love me." But what I would do is I would start by saying it as in the form of a question, where I would say, "God, you love me?" And I would repeat those four words as many times as I needed to until my soul realized the awesome truth, which was, "God, you love me." So it changes it from the question to the statement of fact, which is what I needed in that moment of insecurity and feeling kind of hopeless. I needed to literally repeat it 50, 60 times out loud until I actually meant it in my mind and in my heart that, "God, you love me," as a statement of fact and as a statement of truth. So this amazing truth provided escape for me when everything around me said that I was forever in bondage. So in regards to the Serenity Prayer, I would encourage you to speak the prayer out loud and remind yourself of it in your daily life verbally. You can memorize it, or you can post copies of it everywhere you spend time so that you can experience the power that can come from reading it out loud. Speaking the words of this prayer out loud can provide hope and strength for you in a dark time, and it can further encourage you in your good times when you are doing well in your recovery. So that's everything almost that I wanted to share. In closing, I hope that you have found this introduction to the Serenity Prayer helpful. The Serenity Prayer has been a tool that has helped many in their recovery journeys over the last roughly 80 to 100 years. And I hope that it'll be the same for you, both now and in the future, as it has been for me. So I just want to dedicate with a prayer. I just want to pray for you that you will continue on your journey and that you will gain understanding of your sphere of influence, that you will grow through the challenges that you are presented with, and ultimately that you will live a life of ever increasing serenity. So thank you and God bless.